All right, are we recording? Yeah. So my name's Connor Rhodes, or my artist. My name is Connor Rhodes, and this will be the first of my behind the lyrics series or podcast, whatever it turns into. I'm just going to kind of go into a little bit about my writing process throughout this Melano project, which for me has been an eternity, it feels, and Addiction was the first lyric that I wrote for this whole thing. I think it was around 2018 when I got the lyric finished. So I just wanted to elaborate a little on how I like to work, because I haven't worked with many other people musically. I just kind of figured out my own way, and I guess I'm more of a writer, written writer, than a musician in my head, because for this whole project and pretty much how I've always written a song is making sure the lyric essentially can read like a poem on its own, and what I've found is if I do that well and do enough rounds of re-edits and doing that right, then a lot of the musical ideas kind of just craft themselves, because in a way the poetry has its own rhythm. You're counting syllables, so it's getting the beat of the lyric down first kind of is the way I like to set the beat for the song, and then on any other melodic and embellishment stuff could come to the next stage of the process, and so I guess I'll go into a little bit of the line by line of the lyric. Like I said before, Addiction was the first lyric that I wrote for the project, and it kind of all came from me experimenting with more substances, which when I was much younger had never really done, and hearing the standard, or one of the things you look up, you hear like you're headed down the wrong path or the wrong road. There's a lot of ways people say it, and I guess I kind of got really hooked on that thought because of the time and place I was in my life, and it just couldn't get it out of my head, and I was, I guess, ruminating on it and going to the thoughts of what would that look like? If you were playing it as a music video in your head. What's the lighting? What's the scene setting? What time of day? Where are you at? First verse is, I left the last lane that kept me on track. In the first 10 syllables, it's pretty efficient. I don't think a word can be taken out. Gets the message across. I like the internal or the alliterations of left the last lane. That kept me on track, which will lead into the next line, and forgot any thought that'd bring me to turn back. Pay no mind to reminders that I have from the past. The road less traveled looks like the right path. Narrow with no curves or forks to choose, maybe a few steep hills, but I've got nothing to lose. I got lost tracing trees, divots and grooves, until the sun stripped the sky of all its blues. So that's kind of where all the ideas for the verses came from. Was okay, the whole scene setting, and I knew the verses could go to that, and then I was wondering what's a good hook, what's a good chorus, message, and I like the kind of kiss and slap, the back and forth of people kind of giving you advice, but advice it almost feels so redundant to when you're in a certain mental state. So that's kind of where the idea of having actual background choirs came from, was, so there could be a back and forth, sun follows rain, but I'm still under the weather, grow from the pain, I don't feel any better, don't be afraid, pray my mistakes won't haunt me forever, so I self-medicate, spend my days in the days just to keep it together. Self-medicate and spend my days in the days. That, to this day, is one of my favorite lines. It's super good. And it's why it's taken so long to release my music, because I have to craft it for a while.
Then goes into another chorus, or we go into the verse 2,
which is an elaboration of walking down the wrong road. In the first verse, it was like driving. It's a pretty narrow and straightforward path. You know where addiction leads in the worst cases of scenarios, because everyone tells you and warns you about it. So the blacktop was worn and covered in cracks, littered with cigarette butts and ash. Nobody seemed to keep the streets clean. Just, neglect of yourself, or seeing other people neglect themselves. Not a single soul here to hear me if I scream. It's always internal, or generally internal. So, feels like no one's around. I'm struggling to stand steady with scraped knees. More alliteration. Lots of S's in this line. And I loved the getting pushed off the wagon, because, again, falling off the wagon being a saying for relapsing or whatever it may be. From any light breeze, that's something you really can feel the hard once addiction has its clutches on you. Feels like anything will set you right back into it. Clutching crutches to be stable makes it easy to grieve. It's generally where addictions come from. You're in a low place, you need some sort of comfort, and it might provide temporary comfort, but every time you use it as comfort, it just gets harder and harder when you quit it. And yeah, so kind of had its own beat. The verses are really wordy. The chorus, I split it. I try and not say as many words. The bridge is a nice little reprieve. I think it's a little more poetic. And an evolution of the narrative of the lyric, blindly following a melody I knew. Every flat half step somehow I'd stumbled through. Lighted only by the street lamps and the moon, I never noticed all the notes were out of tune. So the only line that I'm iffy on is still like the third one now that I'm rereading it, but just because it doesn't have any musical reference. But I guess it is some imagery and seed setting. Lighted only by. I like how that rolls off the tongue. Lie and by. Make it sound like it just flows into one run-on sentence. And we ended out with the chorus. Overall, for it being my first lyric after the project, having a lot of times, because I've sang it so much and heard it so much through the process, if I'm not I haven't looked at the lyrics, I kind of it just brings up the whole process when I wrote it, which was a while ago. But that was my first sort of behind the lyric for my project Melano, which will come out. My name's Connor Rhodes. Thank you for listening or watching, And you can go to my website, rhodesconnor.com, RHODESCONNOR.com, or follow me on any of my socials, Rhodes Connor _C. Thank you.